From our studios in Nashville, Tennessee, we bring you Ask WWCR, a bi-weekly program that discusses the operation of WWCR and various topics of interest to all shortwave listeners. And now, here's the current edition of Ask WWCR.
Welcome to Ask WWCR, program number 546, which is intended for broadcast March the 26th through April 9th, 2021. I'm Brady Murray, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Jerry Plummer. Once again, though, by phone. Right, Doc?
That's it. But, you know, the day's coming where we won't have to speak telephonically. I believe that day's coming sometime pretty soon.
I think so. I think that you're close to being ready to do any of the things that you used to do, right?
Yeah, right. I've got the vaccination, and I think yours is coming up in about a week, 10 days with luck.
Sure. We have probably folks who listen to this program that say, I wouldn't take the vaccination, and we're not here to compel anybody to do it, but I think we both agreed. Let's get back on with some degree of normalcy, right?
It's whatever somebody decides. You and I decide if we want to take it, you know, and given that, I'm all happy because that, at least in my mind, will be somewhat protected, right?
Absolutely.
That's good news.
Doc, let's start with a couple of new broadcasters.
Yeah, didn't you say you had some new broadcasters?
We do, and they're going to start during the time that this program will run, so let's go ahead. We're going to be a little ahead on both, but let's start with Dr. Joe Allen. The program is Dr. Allen Presents, and this is going to be Monday, 2:30 Central, Thursday, 11:45 Central, and Friday, 9:15 p.m. Central, all on Transmitter 1. So that's going to cover, 15.825 and then 32.15.
Right, yeah, that's two good frequencies there.
So look for that to begin on April the 5th. We're going to have 3 airings per week. It's a 15-minute broadcast called Dr. Allen Presents, and I strongly suspect that on the new program guide released on the 1st of April, that those details will be there.
That's good. That's real good. Where is he from? Do you know?
He is in Florida.
Florida, okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's good. And you got him 2 good frequencies, too.
We do, definitely. Also, Doc, I want to mention that we'll have an expansion. Saturdays, Transmitter 2, we have Think Ready. It's called The Words of Jesus, Words of Jesus with Don Harris. And I think you may be familiar with that program. Don Harris was with us maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
About a year ago came back on the air with us on 93.50 on Saturdays. He's going to expand. We talked about the broadcast. It's a year old. Are we going to continue with that? And he said, absolutely, and I'd like to actually expand. And so the expansion is going to be Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, which I believe, Doc, help me, is this 0030 ET?
Yeah.
Is that how you'd say that?
Yeah, you got it. You're right on the money.
And the frequency is 4840.
Yeah, I remember. He was around maybe 12 or 15 years ago, and then I remember last year you told me that he was making a comeback, and that's good. Now he's expanding.
It's real good, and expanding is always great. And I wanted to mention this about Don Harris. I've spoken with him many times. This last time when he and I talked about expanding and about 4840, he said that he, a few years ago, was in Africa, and that he got a shortwave radio and tuned up WWCR, and that just did it for him. You know, we tell people this works, we get response, we talk about response, but it was his personal experience that said this really does work.
Oh, yeah, it does. I know a long time ago, the first of those HFCCs I went to was in Tunis, and I brought a shortwave radio, and I believe that we could, get picked up, but when I first heard us over there for the first time, I thought, you know what, this is truly real. This stuff does work.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Makes a big difference to know, right?
Yeah, it does. And, and that way you can kind of talk to somebody straight up and look them in the eye over the phone, if you will, and say, yeah, it will reach. And that's true. You've heard it reach. I know when you was in Tunis, you were tuning up stuff and hearing it reach.
Yes, every frequency. Kept a spreadsheet and kept a very light sleeping schedule to test all those frequencies.
But I know the first day that I heard it, I think 2007, I thought, you know what, this really is true. I always believed it was true. Now I know it's true.
So, Doc, another expansion that we have, shortwave listeners know the program VORW International.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to get into that just a little bit. We expanded that program to WITA Knoxville. And that's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. And that's also, we have a stream for WITA 1490. And it's also available on TuneIn. And I got a response from the host of VORW after the first program, and he says the new airing on WITA already seems to be doing nicely. I got an email from a listener in the Knoxville area who had struggled with getting any of my broadcasts due to RF interference, and was able to hear clearly on 1490 AM. And so he actually sent that response. It's a gentleman named Greg in Knoxville. And that's exactly what he's saying. Hey, this is great. I hear it. It's clear. And then what's interesting to me about that, Doc, is I looked through other responses that he sent. And one was a gentleman, Jarrett, in Kingsport, Tennessee, who always listens on shortwave. So for folks not familiar with the Knoxville area, Kingsport is not far away.
No,
it's not. It's too far for our station in Knoxville to reach.
Mm-hmm.
So that gentleman's picking up WWCR 6115 to listen to VORW.
That's good.
And he's got several, as he always does, several really good reports. Just going through the list here, you're in Ontario, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Florida, again, Pennsylvania, Delaware. He does very well overseas. And these are folks I'm talking about. This is the first time that I've listened, talking about the request that they're asking for him to play. It's just good stuff.
Yeah,
and another one worth mentioning.
He does a very good job of reporting, people that report to him. And again, it's like we were saying. That's truth. That's people actually listening there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just making up something and putting it on a sheet of paper. That's verified by a third party, not me, not you, but him. They're coming to him with these notes. So it definitely gets out, no doubt.
But it tells you quite a bit, Doc. It says, I mentioned that VORW has been on WNQM Nashville at 2 a.m. Central on Saturday mornings, right?
Right.
And here's a gentleman writing in, says, I'm a big fan, listen on 1300 every weekend, 2 a.m., right?
2 in the morning.
So, and some folks have said that they listened on TuneIn. Maybe they're on the West Coast, and it's more like midnight. But
yeah,
the fact is, whether you're listening on TuneIn, on stream, like so many who report listening on 6115 at 2200 UT Saturday, on WITA, on WNQM, the fact of the matter is it's an entertaining show that people listen to. And you can put it on any radio station that is functional and works. And if the content is good, people are going to find it and listen to it.
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, he had just sent a Twitter out today. He likes to go in and test new fast food sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Today he's testing the Burger King, Wendy's, to see if it's any good or not.
Wendy's today, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's the double stack I think he's doing today. He does a lot of things.
I have to look for that. I know that his review's very popular, and he's got a dry personality and picks up on some of the most subtle of details. And I find him very entertaining, and he is extremely transparent when it comes to who's listening and helping the station as far as coverage, and he's just a true shortwave fan, and he's a hard worker, Doc. He does this show, he does his reviews on YouTube, and he stays busy. So he's excellent to have on.
He's the face of countless memes, too, scattered all across the internet.
Yes, he is.
He's amazing.
I'm
glad to hear that ITA, and I already got a response, too.
Yes, immediately. So I just wanted to say, keep supporting the broadcasters on our medium wave, on WWCR. Let those folks hear from you. That's the only way that they know that you're listening. And, Doc, like you know, you've been a shortwave listener for a long, long time. It's just so easy to be in your house, in your office, whatever it is you're doing. You've got the radio on, you're listening. There are programs you've listened to for a long, long time, but never maybe communicated with the speaker. And it's very, very important that you do that. And I'll mention, just beyond that, it's still possible if you want to make a general donation to WWCR to keep the content diverse and to keep us on air. It's always possible to visit WWCR.com and click that donate button at the top.
Yeah,
and, you know, any amount works. We're grateful for every donation, right?
It works very easily, and it's very safe, too. You know, there's no reason to have any fear, you know, with all the things you hear about the Internet. This PayPal deal is very safe. They've never been hacked. Nobody gets your information. It's you can feel comfortable that it's okay to do it.
I ordered something using PayPal from India just last night.
Well,
I feel that safe
I've
about
done it several times, too, for overseas, and I've never had any trouble with it. So if any of our listeners might have a little bit of fear or a little concern about, you know, doing this on the Internet, it's as safe as it gets. I have no troubles doing it, and you don't either. You know, we've done it repeatedly.
So, Doc, in the very limited time that we have left, and it is very limited, I wanted to touch on this because we're going to be back in a couple of weeks. Thoughts on March Madness, and for those outside of the U.S. or outside of North America and people who just don't care much about it, Doc, what is March Madness?
Well, we missed it last year because of the pandemic, but it's the annual time of the year where all the 352 United States universities go in, narrow it down to 64, and they have playoffs to see who's going to be crowned the...
In basketball. So the total number again is what?
352.
352. We narrow it down now to 68, where it used to be 64.
Right.
And I asked you kind of to talk about it, but I want to mention there that of all those universities, Doc, there are several ways to get in. You can be a perennial powerhouse team with big money, or you can be Morehead State from the OVC in Kentucky, who won your own conference tournament and make it into this tournament. And it's a true one-and-done tournament where small schools have the opportunity to have a big stage.
Yeah, that's happened at least twice with Oral Roberts University, and that's familiar to many of our listeners. A little small university that has knocked off two of the big guys. You mentioned
Oral Roberts. They're still in there with a 15 seed, Loyola, a number 8 seed. We've got a Creighton at 5. This is down to 16, right, as we're recording this. USC is a 6. Oregon is a 7. Michigan is a 1. Alabama is a 2. UCLA 11. So of all these teams that they put in the mix, it's not just the number ones, but we do have a couple of those in there. One is Gonzaga and one is Baylor.
Right there. Now, they were number ones going into the March Madness.
Number one going in and still there. So the odds said that they're likely to win it all. There's 4 number 1 seeds. And again,
352 to 68 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have it last year, and that really upset a lot of people in the United States. Not to mention that the betting lines in Las Vegas lost over $3 billion because there wasn't one.
I've never bet on sports. I don't particularly like it, but I know people do it. But it is an exciting tournament, Doc.
Oh, yeah.
We are out of time, but let's both give our prediction. We may be back to, eat crow or to say, hey, we got one right. But I think you and I both are picking Gonzaga to win it all.
And we're both, I believe, picking Gonzaga to beat Baylor.
That's a fact.
And and we didn't put our heads together on it. We just did it separately, and we still come out with the same team.
Right.
So we'll either eat crow next time, or we can tell everybody with confidence we already knew what we were doing.
Sounds good. We'll talk again in a couple of weeks, huh?
Ask WWCR is a bi-weekly presentation of WWCR Incorporated. If there are questions you would like to have answered during the show, send them to Ask WWCR, 1300 WWCR Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee, 37218, USA. You can also send an email to askwwcr@wwcr.com. No email attachments, please. That's Ask WWCR at WWCR.com. Be listening for your questions to be answered on future editions of Ask WWCR.
There's a threat targeting America. One that's growing fast, but may still be hard to see. Lyme disease. Spread by tiny ticks, often smaller than the head of a pin. This dangerous disease is now more widespread than West Nile, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS combined. And if left untreated, it can lead to arthritis, facial paralysis, and even memory and concentration problems, often called brain fog. As the threat of Lyme disease grows to more than 300,000 projected cases each year, it's time for us to target Lyme disease. That means checking for ticks when you've been outside, even in your own backyard. It means seeing a doctor if you experience the symptoms of Lyme disease, which can include joint pain, flu-like symptoms, fever, fatigue, or sometimes a bullseye-shaped rash. Set your sights on stopping Lyme. Learn how you can target Lyme disease at targetlyme.org.
Welcome to another edition of the Australian DX Report. This is Bob Padula in Melbourne, Australia, bringing to you our latest roundup of news concerning shortwave broadcasting stations around the world. We include information concerning propagation reports, monitoring information, solar activity news, schedule information, and other items of interest to shortwave monitoring enthusiasts. A reminder that all times we give in these programs are in UTC, also known as GMT, and all frequencies are in kHz. Information from the Ionospheric Prediction Service in Sydney, New South Wales here in Australia advises that solar activity continues to be assessed at a very low level. The 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux has fallen to 78, and the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has dropped to 17. The IPS also reports that those figures are not expected to change significantly in the immediate future. So it means that during the current year of the present solar cycle number 24, high-frequency propagation on long-distance paths on darkness or semi-darkness circuits on frequencies above about 10 megahertz will continue to be unreliable. However, frequencies below 10 megahertz for darkness circuits will be somewhat more satisfactory. First of all, some shortwave station news. Digital Radio Mundial transmission mode frequencies for Radio France International are as follows. 24 hours, that's midnight to midnight, on 3965, non-directional to Western Europe in French, that's very low power. On 21620, 0830 to 0900 to Southern Asia in French, that's 150 kilowatts and 105 degrees antenna. Also 1130 to 1200, same frequency, 21620, same target area, Southern Asia in French, and same transmitter power and antenna. And 1330 to 1400, 21620, Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts and the antenna 105 degrees. And 1530 to 1600 on 15310, again to Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts, 105 degrees. And 1730 to 1800, 11630, Southern Asia in French, 2130 to 2200 on 9580, again French to Southern Asia, and 2330 to midnight on 9885, also to Southern Asia in French. And that's an updated schedule for the DRM frequencies of Radio France International, with all transmissions from the Issoudun, France transmitting station. Now, some information about Radio New Zealand International, RNZ Pacific. It's made some changes to its schedule, and these are the new frequencies. 1959 to 2258, using 13840 English, 50 kilowatts, 035 degrees antenna. 2259 to 0358 on 15720, again English. 0359 to 0658 on 13730, English. 0659 to 0758 on 11725. 0759 to 0958 on 9700. 0959 to 1258 on 9700. 1259 to 1858 on 6115. 1651 to 1735 on 5975. In English to Tonga and Samoa, that's in the DRM mode. And 1736 to 1835 on 9780, also to Tonga, Samoa, in DRM mode. And 1836 to 1958, 11690, again to Tonga, Samoa, DRM mode. 1859 to 1958 on 11725, that's in the AM mode. That's all Asia, all Pacific service in English. So those are some details of the new frequencies and current frequencies for Radio New Zealand International. We note the continuation of DRM services for several transmissions. Now we turn to China. China National Radio, a station known as the Voice of the Greater Bay Area, CNR7 is the designation. It started test transmissions on shortwave. The current schedule is as follows. 2055 to 0100 on 9570 to Eastern Asia in Chinese. The transmitting power there was 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees. And 0100 to 1805 on 13810 to East Asia in Chinese, again with 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees. And finally 1200 to 1400 on 13810 again to the Middle East in Chinese, and transmitter power there is 100 kilowatts, and then antenna 239 degrees. And those transmissions are from the Kashi transmitting site in China. And reception in Eastern Europe of those frequencies suggests that 13810 has been heard quite strongly, and 0605 to 0855 noted at various times. Now to India. Test transmissions of All India Radio have been noted recently by European monitors. Current frequency and schedule is as follows. All on 5900 and 0530 to 0800 in Hindi to Southern Asia with the Bharati, the Vivid Bharati service, that's the national service, and 1030 to 1200, the same frequency, 5900 in Hindi to Southern Asia, same transmission mode, and 100 kilowatts, and test transmissions are presently in the AM mode. In future they may be in digital radio mondial, digital road. And something a little different this time, on the World Radio TV Handbook Facebook page, we note the following reception in the Middle East of these stations recently. These are all heard at 0450. 11825, World Christian Broadcasting Station, with a program known as African Pathways in English. 11860, Radio Yemen, the relay from Saudi Arabia, broadcasting in Arabic. And 17530, World Christian Broadcasting, with a program in Chinese known as The Light of Light. It looks like good reception in the Middle East there, or various stations during the Middle Eastern daytime period. That's all the information in our program this time. We hope you found the broadcast interesting and helpful for your shortwave radio monitoring.
asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. This is edition NWS 631 for release on Sunday, March 28, 2021. Today on Wavescan, Moon Bounce Radio, Part 2. What is Radio Emma Talk? And the Australian DX Report. 2 weeks back here in Wavescan, we presented the story of Moon Bounce Radio from the European perspective. And this week, we focus our attention on the American initiative for using the moon as a passive reflector of radio signals from planet Earth. Interestingly, it was the focus of one man alone throughout much of his professional life that finally brought success to this venture for the United States. That man was John Hibbett DeWitt, and Ray Robinson has his story.
Thanks, Jeff. In 1922, 16-year-old John H. DeWitt constructed the first radio broadcasting station in Nashville, Tennessee, which he installed in his parents' living room. He launched his new radio station under the call sign WDAA with just 15 watts on the common channel 360 meters, 833 kilohertz, on June the 30th, 1922. 3 years later, he also assisted in the installation of the first radio transmitter for another medium-wave broadcasting station in Nashville, station WSM, which was inaugurated with 1,000 watts on 1060 kilohertz at 15th Avenue S in Nashville on October the 5th, 1925. After that, John DeWitt served with Bell Laboratories in New York for 8 years, and then he returned to his beloved Nashville as the chief engineer for the now quite famous medium-wave station WSM, home of the Grand Ole Opry, in 1932. Almost immediately, he developed plans to maximize the coverage potential for his WSM radio station, which included the installation of a 50-kilowatt transmitter, the highest power permitted in the United States, and the erection of a radio tower that would be the tallest in North America. The location for the new transmitter and tower was an isolated country area some 12 miles south of Nashville. A 29-acre site on Concord Road, Highway 253, was chosen, just off Interstate Highway I-65 and near to the L&N railway line. An ornate transmitter building was constructed, a huge 878-foot tall diamond-shaped Bloor-Knox tower was erected, and an emergency studio was installed in the basement of the building. Back then, the new WSM radio tower was the tallest in North America, a record that it held for nearly 10 years. This powerful new radio complex was taken into service on October the 5th, 1932, and at that time, medium-wave radio station WSM was just 5 years old. During World War II, the United States Government War Department chose the WSM tower as the tallest in the United States to serve as an official backup emergency radio station for communication with American submarines when other forms of communication failed. Now, in 1940, John DeWitt at WSM constructed an 80 watts low-frequency shortwave transmitter and receiver for WGN in Chicago for use in live outside broadcasts. However, before this double unit was delivered to the new owners in Chicago, and therefore while it was still with WSM, engineer DeWitt configured this combination transmitter and receiver to function on 138 megahertz in what we would today call the 2-meter band, with the intent of making an experimental bounce transmission to the moon. Perhaps he was hoping he could receive a reflected signal from the moon 2.5 seconds later on a frequency 300 hertz higher due to the Doppler effect caused by the speed of the moon in space. Ultimately, on the evening of May the 20th, 1940, DeWitt in Nashville, Tennessee, did focus a low-power, very high-frequency radio signal at the surface of the moon. Because of subsequent experiments, we now know there must have been a radio signal reflected from the moon back to the Earth. However, because the transmitted signal was so weak, only 80 watts, there was no reflected signal detected back on Earth on that occasion. Almost 6 years later, John DeWitt tried again to bounce a radio signal, or a radar signal actually, from the surface of the moon. By this time, he was a lieutenant colonel in the Army Signal Corps at Fort Monmouth, near Belmar, New Jersey, and he assembled available electronic equipment for a second era of moon bounce experimentation. The equipment used was a Set Complete Radio, or SCR, Model 271, which included 2 radio towers placed side by side, together with a crystal-controlled radar transmitter and receiver. The radar transmitter, with a power of 3 kilowatts, was modified for an output of 50 kilowatts, and the enhanced antenna system produced an effective radiated power, or ERP, of 10 megawatts. The transmission frequency was 112 megahertz, just above the standard international FM band 2. The first transmission test was made during the evening of January the 10th, 1946, and a moon bounce echo from the moon was successfully received back on Earth. The reflected signal from the surface of the moon, as received on Earth, was calculated at considerably less than 1 watt. The Signal Corps at Fort Monmouth made several additional successful moon bounce tests back then, all identified as a part of Project Diana. An attractive and now valuable QSL card was printed to verify reception reports from international radio monitors who were able to hear the moon bounce signals. So what did they learn from Project Diana? Just 2 observations. First, in order to gain adequate propagation for a radio signal through the normally reflective ionosphere that surrounds the Earth, it's necessary to utilize a very high frequency channel, considerably higher than the normal medium wave and shortwave broadcasting channels. And second, the power loss from the very high frequency radio signal to the moon and back to the Earth again shows a degradation loss greater than 1 billion%. And we'll have more moon bounce radio information, and quite remarkable information actually, in a future edition. For now, back to you, Jeff.
Well, we'll look forward to that, Ray. Some very sad news from NASWA, the North American Shortwave Association, via Glenn Hauser's World of Radio. Pirate radio enthusiast and columnist George Zeller died the morning of March 20th from a house fire in Cleveland, Ohio, caused by electrical overloading. We remember him especially from his enjoyable animation of the raffles that were held at the Winter SWL Fest in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. More sad news from Dario Gabrielli via the Asociación Española de Radio Escucha. The voice of the Islamic Republic of Iran announced in its Spanish program on March 21st that this was their last day of transmission on shortwave. Here's the very short announcement in Spanish.
Apreciados radio oyentes, muchos nos han seguido durante años, lo cual agradecemos infinitamente. Sin embargo, con gran pesar les informamos que a partir del 21 de marzo se interrumpirá la transmisión de la onda corta de nuestra radio. Y en adelante Podrán escucharnos a través de la página web de Hispan TV, así que no perdemos el contacto. Esperamos que nos sigan por medio de Internet.
The announcement indicated that the Voice of Iran programs in Spanish would continue to be heard via Internet only. We don't know yet if this ceasing of shortwave broadcasts from Iran applies to any other languages. And Ruben Guillermo Margenet in Argentina informed us that some other important shortwave broadcasts will be ending on March 27th, which is the last day of the B20 broadcast season. These are the Portuguese and Spanish broadcasts of NHK Radio Japan on 6195 kHz at 0900 and 0930 UTC respectively, via WHRI in South Carolina, USA. Here's the announcement from NHK in Portuguese that Ruben Margenet sent us.
Temos aviso importantíssimo. Comunicamos que a NHK World Japan deixará de fazer a transmissão em ondas curtas de sua transmissão em português para a América do Sul no dia 27 de março, sábado.
Pois é, essa medida foi tomada por conta do fechamento da estação retransmissora nos Estados Unidos. Então, por favor, a partir do dia 28 de março, domingo, ouçam nossos noticiários e programas através do website oficial ou pelos aplicativos gratuitos da emissora.
Vocês poderão ouvir também por podcast ou ver as notícias mais recentes e outras informações lá no Facebook. Esperamos que vocês continuem a ouvir e a apreciar os vários conteúdos da NHK World Japan a qualquer hora e em qualquer lugar através do seu computador, tablet ou smartphone. Infelizmente, pelo rádio, pelas ondas curtas, a transmissão será suspensa.
That was the Portuguese language announcement from NHK that they were ending broadcasts on shortwave to South America in Portuguese and Spanish as of March 27th from WHRI in South Carolina. Well, WHRI was sold last year to the owner of WBCQ in Maine, and all of the former programming on WHRI has been canceled, including relays of Radio Korea and the Voice of Vietnam. Radio Japan continues with a daily Spanish broadcast to Central America via WRMI in Florida at 0400 UTC on 5985 kHz. On March 13th, the European DX Council, EDXC, held its second ever virtual meeting on the Zoom platform with around 40 DXers and shortwave listeners from all around Europe and a few from other continents as well. EDXC Secretary General Chrissy Brand in England announced that this year's EDXC conference is tentatively planned for September 17th to 19th in Bucharest, Romania. On Friday, the first day of the conference, there was a tour scheduled of Radio Romania International, one of the last major shortwave broadcasters left in Europe. But in view of the COVID situation and international travel restrictions, the meeting is not yet confirmed. Up-to-date information can be found on the EDXC website, www.edxc.org. In addition to general discussions at the latest EDXC virtual meeting, there were two very interesting presentations. One of them was by Jim Salmon, the British producer of a monthly DX program called Radio Ematalk. That's EMMATOC. Here's part of Jim's talk.
Hello to everyone. I'm Jim Salmon. I live in Chelmsford in the UK. Very lucky to live here because Chelmsford has a great radio connection, being the home of the first radio factory in the UK, Guglielmo Marconi's factory. But primarily I'm here today to talk about Radio Ematalk. I thought I'd split my talk into three sections. Firstly, how I got interested in radio, then me as a listener, and then moving on to being a broadcaster. A couple of very poignant things to start with. I always wonder how I got interested in radio, because it is a bit of a strange hobby. I'm sure we'll all admit that. A few years ago, I found online And suddenly thought, well, that's interesting. So the BBC Empire service, which I think became the BBC World Service, started in December 1932. And I thought, that's interesting, because my dear mother was born in 1932. In fact, she was born in December 1932. In fact, she was born on the 19th of December 1932. So that's quite nice for me, because I'm a great fan of the BBC World Service, and I like the fact that my mother was born on the actual day that the BBC Empire service started. On a much, much lesser note, the Today programme on Radio 4, which is not the longest running programme, but a very long running programme, well-respected programme. I don't know if you can read that on the screen share there, but it launched in October 1957. I think you know where I'm going to go with this. It launched on the 28th of October 1957, and that was the day I was born. So I share my birth date with the Today programme. So 28th of October is when I was born. So moving on to what got me interested in radio, perhaps that's the fate or the coincidence, I don't know. Perhaps it's fate that I should be interested in radio. So born in 1957 means that in 1970 I was 13 years old, and it was a great time to be listening to radio, listening to music, and this brightly coloured ship turned up off the Essex coast and started transmitting as Radio North Sea International. And I have to say, I was hooked from the start. Listened to the dramas and the jamming and everything that went along with that radio station. So that got me interested in listening to the radio. Then became interested in other stations that were then transmitting off the Dutch coast. This was a fascinating station, Capital Radio from the King David. Lovely aerial system on this ship. As a radio ham, that's probably more interesting than some of the programs were. So it wasn't very successful. They had a lot of problems with it, but that was an interesting station. Another station I really loved listening to as a kid was Radio Atlantis, especially in 1974 when before they closed down, they ran an all-English programming for a week, and that was a very good station. But of course, the station that really captured me at that time was Radio Caroline, which had come back, and I listened to Caroline continuously from their return in 1980. Actually was listening at the time when their ship was sinking and the crew were taken off on the lifeboat. Never believed they'd ever return, but thankfully I was proven wrong, because in 1983 they returned with an amazing vessel called the Ross Revenge, and with this amazing 300-foot mast they produced a very good signal. And throughout the 1980s, up until that mast fell down, they produced a very good, strong signal and some excellent programming. So I listened to Caroline then until they had to shut down in 1990, and still listen today. One of the fortunate things about living in Chelmsford is that the Ross Revenge is now, albeit with a much smaller mast, is anchored in the River Blackwater, which is only 20 miles away from me. So often when we're driving around Essex, we like visiting the coastline. We can see this little red dot, and I'm always looking out for the Caroline ship. So I took this picture about 3 years ago, and here's myself and my good lady Anne, and we went out on a boat trip to the Ross Revenge from West Mersey, and spent about 2 hours on board, and fascinating ship. I have been on it before as a visitor when it was out in the South Falls Head. But it's still a fascinating place to visit, and if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend it. So that's, I guess, really how I became interested in listening to the radio. Above all, I am a listener. I put myself as a listener first, because I think that's one of the most important things.
That was Jim Salmon, producer of the DX program, Radio Amateur, which is shared on shortwave stations such as Channel 292 and WRMI. We'll have more of Jim's talk on an upcoming edition of Wavescan. Right now, let's go to Melbourne, Australia. Here's Bob Padula with his DX report for this month.
Information from the Ionospheric Prediction Service in Sydney, New South Wales, here in Australia, advises that solar activity continues to be assessed at a very low level. The 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux. It's fallen to 78, that's 78, and the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has dropped to 17. The IPS also reports that those figures are not expected to change significantly in the immediate future. So it means that during the currency of the present solar cycle number 24, high frequency propagation on long distance paths, on darkness or semi-darkness circuits, on frequencies above about 10 megahertz will continue to be unreliable. However, frequencies below 10 megahertz for darkness circuits will be somewhat more satisfactory. First of all, some shortwave station news. Digital Radio Mondial transmission mode frequencies for Radio France International, 24 hours, that's midnight to midnight, on 3965, non-directional to Western Europe in French, that's very low power. On 21620, 0830 to 0900 to Southern Asia in French, that's 150 kilowatts and 105 degrees antenna. Also 1130 to 1200, same frequency, 21620, same target area, Southern Asia in French, and same transmitter power and antenna. And 1330 to 1400, 21620, Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts and the antenna 105 degrees. And 1530 to 1600 on 15310, again to Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts, 105 degrees. And 1730 to 1800, 11630, Southern Asia in French, 2130 to 2200 on 9580, again French to Southern Asia, and 2330 to midnight on 9885, also to Southern Asia in French. And that's an updated schedule for the DRM frequencies of Radio France International, with all transmissions from the Issoudun, France transmitting station. Some information about Radio New Zealand International, RNZ Pacific. It's made some changes to its schedule and with new frequencies. 1959 to 2258 using 13840 English, 50 kilowatts, 035 degrees antenna. 2259 to 0358 on 15720, again English. 0359 to 0658 on 13730, English. 0659 to 0758 on 11725. 0759 to 0958 on 9700. 0959 to 1258 on 9700. 1259 to 1858 on 6115. 1651 to 1735 on 5975. In English to Tonga and Samoa, that's in the DRM mode. And 1736 to 1835 on 9780, also to Tonga, Samoa, in DRM mode. And 1836 to 1958, 11690, again to Tonga, Samoa, DRM mode. 1859 to 1958 on 11725, that's in the AM mode. All Asia, all Pacific service in English. Now those are some details of the new frequencies and current frequencies for Radio New Zealand International. We note the continuation of DRM services for several transmissions. Now we turn to China. China National Radio, a station known as the Voice of the Greater Bay Area, CNR7 is the designation. It started test transmissions on shortwave, and the current schedule is as follows. 2055 to 0100 on 9570 to Eastern Asia in Chinese. The transmitting power there is 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees, and 0100 to 1805 on 13810 to East Asia in Chinese, again with 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees, and finally 1200 to 1400 on 13810 again to near Middle East in Chinese, and transmitted power there is 100 kilowatts, and the antenna 239 degrees. And those transmissions are from the Kashi transmitting site in China. And reception in Eastern Europe of those frequencies suggests that 13810 has been heard quite strongly. 0605 to 0855 noted at various times. Just a reminder that full detail ADXR QSL cards are available by contacting this address. The URL is simply adxr.org. So give it once again, adxr.org. At that address you'll find all the details about how you may send in a reception report, and you can receive a QSL card via postal mail, that's physical postal mail, or via the internet. So until our next program, this is Bob in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Wishing you all good listening, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Bob. And let me just mention a quick reception report here from Jawad Saber. And he is in Sidi Hajjaj, Setat, Morocco. He picked up Wavescan on 15770 kilohertz from Okeechobee, Florida, at 11:30 UTC, using his Texan PL380 receiver, and he says it was a distance of 6,865 kilometers from Okeechobee to Sidi Hajjaj in Morocco. Menuetto a Trio from Joseph Haydn's Le Miracle Symphony No. 96 in D major ends this edition of Wavescan. Thank you for listening to the International DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson. Next week, the radio saga on two small islands south of New Zealand. Well, Jerry Plummer will be with us with more from the HFCC conference and our Japan DX report. Several QSL cards are available for Wavescan. Send your AWR and KSDA reception reports for the program to the AWR address in Bangkok, Thailand. And also to the station your radio is tuned to, WRMI or WWCR or KVOH or Voice of Hope Africa, or to IRRS Italy, or to the AWR relay stations that carry Wavescan. Remember, too, you can send a reception report to the DX reporters when their segment is on the air. Here in the program, they will also verify with their own colorful QSL card. Return postage and an address label are always appreciated. The email address for AWR QSLs is qsl@awr.org. The postal address for AWR QSLs is Adventist World Radio, P.O. Box 234, Prakanong, that's Prakanong, Bangkok 10110, Thailand. Again, Adventist World Radio, P.O. Box 234, Prakanong, Bangkok 10110, Thailand. And the email address for other correspondence to Wavescan, not reception reports, is Wavescan at AWR.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida, USA. Till next week, good listening, everyone.